For a number of years, I've been able to utilize what I consider to be the dynamics of flash drive university. In other words, utilization of flash drives to combine media that I've been utilizing in other areas. So the combination of film, still photography, music in my classroom has been a very useful thing. So therefore, knowing that that's something that's a byproduct of the fact that digital technology has taken what was fundamentally an analog type of media experience and produced it or reproduced it into a digital context, it meant that utilizing the digital stuff in the classroom was great. Now, there's a number of disruptions which have occurred, so wanting to talk about the good things which I've personally and many other people have benefited from in being able to utilize digital technology, while at the same time also addressing some of the ramifications in the higher educational business model that will inevitably take place, comparable to what kind of disruptions have taken place in the music area and in the cinema area. I thought would be a kind of interesting discussion to have with people who are actually in higher education. What I'm going to do is basically initially talk about the concept of disruption. Disruption technologically, historical disruptions, in terms of both the economics of a disruption, the technological aspects of the ramifications of disruption when it happens, and then ultimately bring it to the model that we deal in. So I'll be looking at the entertainment industry as a sort of core line of inquiry, but then we'll ultimately start talking about what's happening in our world relative to the future disruption in education. When we talk about the idea of a technological disruption, we look at the idea of, we all sort of have our own little graveyard of disruptions and by casualties of them from in our closets and in our homes. Cassette tape recorder, PDA, film camera, video camera. You don't really need them anymore because I've got all those things right here on my cell phone. Okay, and I've got more than that on my cell phone because I've also got a little computer on my cell phone that enables me to write letters and send things off and all that from a portability standpoint from anywhere that I'm sitting, whether I'm in New York, whether I'm in London, it doesn't matter. And I can do all that on that one little cell phone. So all these technologies and the industries that stood underneath that have, basically some of them actually have gone by the by. Now, a disruption doesn't necessarily result in one line of business closing down completely. So in other words, we still have trains despite the fact that transcontinental travel was pretty much taken over largely by airlines, or intercontinental travel on steamships and on luxury liners wasn't completely shut down. But bottom line is that the airline industry pretty much took it over, and as they expanded and did jumbo jets and all that, they were able to do more and more. But the key thing to look at is the fact that a technology can come in and really change the game. And so in today's world, you're seeing that piracy is the biggest complaint in terms of the motion picture industry. Absolutely is disrupting it. You'll see television commercials, you'll see commercials at the movies saying, talking about people stealing and pirating material. Globally, it's an incredible threat because for the motion picture industry, there are whole countries that completely operate on a piracy basis and don't even think about our intellectual property. So that for our students, when we talk to them, if you talk to them about, the right or wrong, the improper, taking something for free because it's available, they don't see it that way. They're like, are you crazy? What are you talking about? And that's one of the realities that we have to deal with in terms of digital technology, is the fact that it's a disruption that sticks because it really metamorphosizes the person engaged with it, because it's easy to do, it becomes the normal thing to do, and it's cheaper. Now, in terms of the good side of digital technology, because that's the bleak side in one respect, but it's the absolute tsunami that you can't get away from. But in terms of what I do with my courses, I found it to be a wonderful thing because it enables me to take different materials and to incorporate them. So in different courses that you might teach, you can be able to utilize it in a way that's very, very effective. So I've had the chance to teach over the years in courses like history, African American history courses. So we're talking about some of the different areas you can focus in on. Talk about slavery as one of them, African slave raids, different aspects of it, Emancipation Proclamation, the Underground Railroad as a subset of that. can look and get into the lives of the individuals who were participating in that period of time as abolitionists. Harriet Tubman is one of those abolitionists. And then give a little biography. And it's a good way to move through it because a lot of students don't have very much of a historical background in today's world. But if you want to talk about Harriet Tubman, you have the facts here, including the 1857 rescue of her aged parents. And then the great thing about the digital technology moment is that within this simple PowerPoint, you can also get into a more sort of living, breathing, in-depth focus on what the person is about by sort of bringing up, like, for example, this sort of surprising moment here, this quote from her: "I freed 1,000 slaves. I could have freed 1,000 more if they only knew they were slaves." And take it back to that 1857 moment when she engaged with her parents in getting them to come to freedom. This is Cicely Tyson in 1978.
Harriet? Mama. Oh, my child, my child. What's wrong, Daddy?
What you doing here now? I thought you was up to Cambridge.
Oh, Daddy, there's some folks that got dressed up to look like me from the underground. You mean Coleman and Smith went up there?
Yeah. But they're gonna be coming back. So now you go on and you get out of here, you hear me? Go on, yeah?
I'm going, Daddy, I'm going.
So even as counterintuitive as a moment as a person couldn't see themselves as being a slave or would actually want freedom, you can bring it out by having, bringing in an episode like that from a telefilm that was done back in the 70s just to give a sense of what was happening on the ground. And so one of the things about motion pictures, of course, is to look at them beyond the concept of entertainment, but also to see them as being historically the capacity to propagandize. And so one of the films that I tend to focus on in different years is The Birth of a Nation. In the film, what in his vision, D.W. Griffith, actually happened within the nature of when the black people got elected into the state legislature. So one thing that he does is he completely restructures the concept of black Reconstruction in terms of, for the first time, black people had the right to vote, and they elected black officials. So he shows you. And finally, I teach constitutional law, so obviously when you talk about segregation in the United States, after Plessy v. Ferguson, 1896 case that basically federalized separate but equal, it's easier to make it to give students in today's world an impression of really what it was like when you can bring specific photography that speaks to those realities, so you can actually show them what it was like to have segregated drinking fountains or segregated bathrooms, or even to the points of absurdity, segregated phone booths, or even worse, segregated Coke machines. Because people wouldn't believe it, but when you can actually show them pictures and use the digital technology, it helps you go to another level. But the point is that, what's all this got to do with my world, my being collectively? Well, if we look at the motion picture model, and this is getting us back to our educational issues, the product was movies. The software were initially films, then videotapes, then DVDs, and now video files. The software creators were contracted collaborative artistic teams. The producer distributors were studios. The traditional delivery systems were brick and mortar, in other words, physical theaters, exhibition houses. In music, the product was recorded music. The software were first records, then tapes, then CDs, then music files. The creators were independent as well as contracted solo and collaborative artists. Producer distributors were music companies, and once again, the big traditional delivery systems were the brick and mortar music stores. But now let's look at our business, higher education. The product of courses and degree credentials. The software classes, courses. The creators are your independent as well as contracted artists. The producer distributors are the universities, and the traditional delivery systems are the brick and mortar campuses, the brand, the university. Well, I enjoyed the presentation very much. I was able to get to a number of my key points that I wanted to get to in terms of the modeling issues from industry to industry, music, film, and higher education. In the post discussions, what was fantastic was to hear people's different takes and their own sort of concepts as to what the ramifications would be as this thing progresses, talking about some of the newer educational models which have come up, such as edX and Coursera, which I mentioned in my talk, and then hearing them, wanting to know more about it, or in some cases people did know more about it. And in some cases, people had really not thought very much about it at all. But these are things which are very much in the world of academia at this point. So it was very good to feel that you were both sharing information and also having an opportunity to sort of learn more because other people had other bases of knowledge.